might be tired, but he should be here in a few minutes.
Is Kim coming?
Oh, right, Kim's not here either.
I think no.
Let me grab
She's
her.
already got-
We don't have. a
She was
quorum
unable to attend.
Okay, without him. See right there.
Thanks.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started for the meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah. Item one is the roll call. And basically, all of the members of the transit committee is here with the exception of Kim. I'm not sure if she's going to be here or not. Do you know?
I don't know. I haven't heard from her.
Okay. All right. So item two is the approval of the minutes for the February 16, 2024 meeting. Need a motion for approval?
So move.
I will second.
Okay, it's been moved and supported to approve the minutes for February 16. Any questions? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, item three is the survey and questionnaire update. At our last meeting, Chris provided us with the survey and there were a couple of changes in it, I think. And, so I added it back to the agenda thinking we could still kind of finalize it at this meeting, if that works for you, Chris.
It sure does. And I have to say that I think a lot of you also received Marie's response that I don't know who Colleen is. That made a response to our survey questions. Did anybody take a look at those? I think she actually hits the nail on the head. I think reading her responses to our questions to, I think, simplify them and get to where, to the ultimate question of what decisions are you trying to make? Where she had written rewritten the survey questions, which I think are better than the ones that I had put together. I don't know if you saw that too, Will.
I didn't see it.
All the input is
It's really
constructive.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
Will and I were working on the question, but I think to what we were trying to get at, and she did an even better job of drilling deeper into these might be the questions you want to ask from your residents. Did everybody, if you didn't get the email, I printed it out just to go through some of those, but I think she's expanding on them that are simpler and trying to get to the information that we're seeking. So I think your very first question is coming up is whose opinion or attitude matters to us? And I think we need to get down to, is it all the residents? Is it registered voters? Is it those who are riders? Is it those voters in the millage that can vote in the millage? And I think she's making it like, what's our target audience that we want to send this survey to? Is it all of the Scio residents or is it riders? Is it future riders? What,
It seems to me like we have different questions for different audiences. That's what we were talking about in a prior meeting is that we want to know sort of what businesses think of the bus transit and whether they and their employees and their customers are using it and what they would like to see in the
Right.
future. And then we wanted to we wanted to hear from current riders. But one of the things that you and I were grappling with when we were working on the survey questions is how do we reach the future riders, the people who aren't yet riding, or how do we measure them? I mean, maybe we can't do it through a survey. Maybe it's some other measure. I posed that question in the email to the group, whether there's some kind of like demographic measure that transit planners use to try and predict future ridership. Can you do that? I mean, you can know where there's new construction going, but are there sort of ways of predicting how many or guesstimating how many future riders there will be in a particular area?
So we usually turn to Watts and SEMCOG because they have modeling programs for those. And so Ryan can probably point the group in the direction to who to contact for that. Ryan Buck is
You mean as far as future riders?
yeah.
Mhm.
Because that seems like that's a big question is, you know, what, if we're trying to predict what the future needs are, how do we get at that?
Yeah, survey for future
Yeah.
riders is hard, because that's what we've been doing for the Grass Lake survey. I have out and I physically have to go out and make presentations and talk to groups, and now we're finally getting answers. But for future riders, just to put a survey out, you don't get responses.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I went on the
See where
community
that
that
would be
we
difficult.
got a lot more.
So I guess, Chris, what did you and Will and others come up with as far as questions?
Yeah, so,
Because, we have to start somewhere in this process.
yes, and we put some basic questions that I had sent out. And that was, and I think it's what we want to ask, because we don't want too many questions for the survey for the riders as far as, increased bus frequency or increased bus hours. Then we got on-demand ride. If you had to choose in Washington County, would you prefer on-demand ride or would you like more fixed route services? I think the questions are appropriate. What I think it gets better is with this response from Colleen, who's expanding on those questions. I think that's really what we want to be asking from, well, that's just one of the questions. Are we asking this of all residents or just the voters or likely voters or, only the riders? I kind of tend to think we probably need to send it out to, all residents, voters, village voters, potential riders. I'd say let's cover it all unless somebody says differently. But I also would say the questions she put in that response that we're expanding on them as in, for instance, she's saying, what do you mean by increased frequency? Then we brought it up, like, do you want increased frequency? She's phrasing it as, would you like scheduled buses to run every 15 minutes? Between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. and between 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. on weekend. I think we're trying to make it more specific for them than if you were just a regular resident or rider, you may ask, what do you mean by increased frequency? If we just ask, would you prefer increased frequency? I get where she's coming from, but what does that mean? I think a typical rider is not gonna know what that means.
Right.
But if you ask them specifically, well, does that mean, do you want the buses to run every 15 minutes between a certain hour? I think that asks a more specific question that's even more valuable data to us. I don't know if everybody else agrees, but I felt like that's the way we should ask the same amount of questions and kind of get more specific with them.
I agree. The only problem I have is, what is it gonna tell us? I mean, if you ask people, would you like the buses to run more frequently? I'm guessing most people would say, sure.
Yeah.
Cost, right?
I mean, are we asking them, would you be willing to pay, more for buses that ran more frequently or something like that? Then it's more of it measures more meaningfully, how much they would like that.
But what is more frequently? See, that's what.
Well, no,
Yeah.
you use the specifics, but, if the bus, maybe the question is, if the buses ran every 15 minutes, would you use the buses more often?
Oh, that'd be a good way to
Yeah,
word it.
I think that's a better way of wording it than just saying, well, would you like more frequent riders?
Or even currently the buses on the fixed routes run every 30 minutes? Is that what it is?
Yeah, I think so.
If they ran every 15 minutes, would you use the bus more often?
Yeah, I think that's a
But
better
it's-
way of posing the
yeah,
question.
But is that realistic? I mean,
Well,
can I?
that does bring up a,
I'm just,
That's right.
I don't wanna ask a question if we already know it's something that
that's-
may not work because of the costs associated with it.
and if I gleaned from our meeting, I think earlier this week, you're right. I think there's a lot to be said for set routes already that's running out of Blake, that this may not be something that's realistic, that we're starting to change routes, set routes that are already in progress. I mean, I think I kind of get that sense that from you and Forrest, like, this isn't something, even if we wanted to do with either the cost, it's not practical to do it at this time.
It can take a couple of years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so,
But I think Will brings up a good point of, what would you also be willing to support the increased cost with it too? I mean, when we did our long range plan, we laid out scenarios that was like, leave it alone. Here's scenario one, you know, that would cost how many ever mills, then here's scenario two and here's scenario three. If you were to say the numbers that you had listed out before of like 0.4 pays for this, 0.5 pays for this, and just say, you know, are you guys willing to be supporting this? I think you need that component of it. Because otherwise, you're right, what Will enjoys both sides, you're probably just gonna run, and the only surveys you'll get back are the people that are like, yeah, we love this.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, more is better, right?
but we're not, yeah, about the cost, of course, it's,
You can also do a universe narrowing, if you use the medium of a phone survey on this, you can say, do you currently use public transit? Whether it's yes or no, you can dictate your follow-up questions from that. If you do go like a phone survey route or something like that, you can get two sets of questions depending on the answer to that first question. Or if they say no, would you be more apt to use it, if took place more frequently or something like that?
okay.
It's more complicated than.
I know, it's, and we wanna keep it short, remember, we
Complicated,
wanna
yeah.
keep them, you know, we don't want them to take more than 5 or 10 minutes on this, cause you're gonna lose interest.
Right.
So I guess, you know, and we do want to keep it short as far as the survey. I guess the question that I have is, you know, whether we need help with putting together some document or questionnaire and to try to get that information to our audience, or is that something we should try to do ourselves? You know, I'm not an expert in this area.
I guess so like as far as taking the questions and then putting them actually in motion, is that kind of what you're?
Right,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm trying to kind of figure out exactly how to get this done.
Yeah.
And to do it in a timely manner.
Sure, I mean, the ride hat on, I come from a political and legislative background, so what we typically do is go through a vendor to do a phone survey. I'm sure we can probably recommend who we've used in the past to do everything. You will basically, give them a list of questions, which, sorry, I didn't get a chance to review them fully. I think I glanced and they looked for the most part pretty good and what you're trying to narrow down. Give that to them and then they'll compare it with a qualified voter registry or some sort of citizen list, and that's kind of getting your universe. From there, you can narrow it down whether you want by age, geographical area, et cetera. You can get pretty granular with what you're looking for.
Do we wanna go that route? I mean, I only asked if the
Yeah.
cost involved, the timing and the cost is something that we're looking at.
You can, time-wise, you can turn it around pretty quick.
Uh-huh.
If you know what you want, a lot of it's on, the vendor should be able to narrow down what you're looking for, but it is a hefty cost.
Okay.
Yeah, that may be the answer right
Yeah,
there.
I'll tell you, we've had a very difficult time getting any kind of large response to surveys. I mean, if you look at, Pro survey, you look at ESTF survey, and that was, I mean, that part of the ESTF survey, they were in the voting lines, after people voted, asking them questions. And so, out of
Land use
17
master
or
plan.
20,000, I don't know how many households we have, 6,000 some households, or what's
Yeah.
that household?
Yeah.
Out of that, I think the best a survey ever did was 300.
Yeah.
And most of them are in the hundreds. So, yeah, a survey is great, but it's all based on the responses that you get. And who, and if it's even representative. And it's typically the people who are, involved in the township that respond to the surveys. I mean, and that was putting them out in the newsletters with QR codes and the whole bit.
Something you can't force people to answer
Right.
it, that's the.
And that's why
the
sometimes
part.
a phone survey, even though they're more costly,
Mhm.
you at least get.
It is more of an old school thought, but that is the best way and the most used way still to get the most responses,
A phone survey.
even as archaic as it sounds.
So,
Do we wanna go, I mean, I guess I
I mean-
posed that to the group, did you wanna go that route? I mean,
so just to back up a little bit before we talk about, how to get the information out there. Did you two come up with questions?
yes,
Could you kind of walk us through those questions?
yes, I have written down. Okay, survey for riders, we can. We had posed, if you had to choose, would you prioritize increased bus frequency or increased bus hours? That's the first question. If you had to choose based on where you'd like to go in Washtenaw County, would you prefer on-demand ride, in parentheses, would cost more, take less time, or a more fixed route service, takes longer, costs less? If you could add more fixed route stops, what additional stops would you suggest? Please list as many as you'd like. Any other suggestions you have for getting riders to where you want to go? And what would motivate you to use the bus service more? As a bus rider, is your destination located along the Jackson Road corridor, or are you heading to downtown Ann Arbor? How long are you willing to wait at a bus stop? Would additional bus shelters encourage you to ride the bus more often? And that's when we got into, then we went into a survey for the Jackson Road businesses regarding maybe a get down or go pass. So,
Real quick, so first question again?
yep. First question was, if you had to choose, would you prioritize increased bus frequency or increased bus hours?
Do you want me to make a copy for
I
everybody?
can, you know what, I can go make a quick copy of it. Want, or then. Second. Yeah,
I think it comes back though to, the question that was posed by, I forgot her name now, does she work with Marie or?
Marie.
Oh, you mean
I'm
Maria.
Shasta.
That's
I
right.
work with her.
But the person that Marie forwarded.
Oh, Colleen.
Colleen,
Okay.
She's someone that, she's someone she uses, I think, as an advisor for her
Oh,
consulting
okay.
business, so it's
I
an
wasn't sure
expert.
whether-
Yeah, no, she explained, but, oh, I can actually tell you, just meant the emails right here. She is. Yeah, so it's a colleague, I believe it's an expert that she uses for her consulting.
Okay, all right, so someone she turns to for advice on this.
Mhm.
I mean, I think she asked a key
question.
question, and that is, you know, who are we trying to get information from, and
Right.
what questions are we trying to answer?
And, yeah. And I think the last, when we met the last time, we talked about the audience being in one case, the riders. And then in the other case, we talked about the Jackson Road corridor, as far as looking at other services that could be provided.
In some ways, if we're gonna do a survey, it seems like having those defined groups is really helpful.
Mhm.
It's when we start going out and saying, the universe of people who live in Scio Township, what are their views on transportation? That's when I think we're crossing a line in terms of, well, in terms of cost for one thing, but also, what is the question, what questions are we trying to answer?
Mhm.
And what Chris and I were bumping up against is, in some ways, what would really be helpful to know when we're weighing expansion of the service area is people who aren't riding the bus now, would they ride the bus if it was more available to them? And that's not gonna be the current riders for the most part. I mean, they might say, oh, yes, I would ride it more often if it was available, if it was more convenient. But it could be people who don't even live here yet, and that's what I was
Yeah.
realizing. I mean, we've got all this housing that's, under construction or in the pipeline.
Mm.
The people who will live in that housing would be potential riders, but they're not there yet, and they may not even know that they're gonna be there yet themselves. So how do we reach them? We can't really survey them.
Right.
Is there a way to sort of measure? And I guess what we would need to do is turn to Watts and SEMCOG for that, I think for that piece of information, for projecting future riders who don't exist yet.
But couldn't you get some of that information from people that live in the area that is not using the service now, and they're already there?
I suppose, we could, if we targeted a mailing, to
those
say,
areas?
yeah, to those areas that are further out Jackson, for example. I think we talked about maybe trying to hold a meeting at Scio Farms to hear from people directly, but that may be not the most efficient way to get information from people. Cause then they have to not only, they'd have to want to give us the information enough to come to a meeting. That's about as inconvenient as you can make it.
I think, like I said, trying to survey people who don't use the service, that's the biggest thing, is you have to have some kind of event and get them there.
Really?
I mean, like, I've been doing the Grass Lake survey over the 3 months I've been there. They had 18 filled out before I started, and we're at well over 100. And it's only gone up when I go do like the presentations, or I go to groups and say, hey, can you scan this QR code, do it, and when I walk around town and give them the paper, then they'll scan it and do it, so to reach potentials, because we have to have this information by next month, right, for you guys to decide.
Right.
It's gonna be hard to do now, you guys can pass them like that, the event
Actually-
coordinator at
Actually, this month.
this month, okay,
Yeah,
sorry,
that's fine.
yeah. The
Yeah.
event coordinator, I just met with her at Scio Farms, because I wanted to go talk to the residents about Wave, and, she's really great, and I know she's got events she's planning this year, so if she had one sometime this month, then you guys could do it there, but I haven't got the information yet, but, I mean, you do an event, and then if you do an event like that and you really want residents there, that's really where you guys would have to like have pizza or something to get people there, and then you could ask them to do it and just say, we're trying to help you more.
Alright, so you're already working on planning an event at Scio
I'm not
Farms?
planning, but they have a couple events planned this year. I haven't got the information yet, but she asked me to be a vendor there. She's trying to do some events in Scio Farms that gets the businesses in the area to the residents. And I asked if I could come so we can show residents like they can get their children to childcare on Jackson Road, 'cause there's a childcare center in Park Plaza, and still get to work between the two services. So I don't believe the events are this month because I haven't got the information yet, but that probably, if you guys want to reach a massive amount of people who aren't using the services, that'd probably be the best way to do it, is go to that area. And like I said, maybe if you have like pizza and stuff for the families, try to get people there and then fill them out, and it kind of give you an idea, but it'd probably be the best way to do it with the time crunch we have.
And that would be tight though, because you need some advance time to plan and advertise an event. And so, yeah, I don't know that we could do it. I don't know if we have enough time. Not by the end of March. I mean, maybe there's a point in doing it after we
Right.
give our options to the board. The board won't have to vote to put something on the ballot, on the August ballot, until the end of April, right?
I believe so.
So we could still gather information that could inform the board even after we sort of lay out what the options are for the board in terms of a millage proposal.
So with the questions that you have here, just looking at them, they're kind of geared towards the rider. So do we still want to know what riders think?
Yeah, I think that's part of the question is,
Yeah.
who do we want to target? I think riders
Yeah,
are part of it.
So that might be part of it. So, if that's the case, how do we get that information from riders? I'm asking, the two of you because you're through the transportation agency. How do you normally get information from riders?
So that we can push out, just speak on behalf, because I've been here a little longer. So that we can usually push out through our usual communications channels, and then if we're interested in distributing like flyers with QR codes on them to send them to the surveys, we can also usually have drivers pass those out on board the buses as well.
So would it make sense for us to do that, working with you to try to get these questions answered?
And that's not a huge lift, yeah, that, we can, yeah.
So we could do that with Wave too.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I would put actual QR codes right in the bus, so while they're sitting in there, they can scan it and do it. And just
Yeah.
explain what it's about and hope, and get them, and then have the driver tell them about it.
Because I think that makes a lot of sense, because you're gonna get most of the issues out with the people who are already using the system. I mean, if they think, if it's hard to get from A to B, or, well, I know they may also know people who can't ride the bus because of certain constraints, like hours and so forth. The people who are trying to use the system know what the issues are with it.
right. They can tell you firsthand what works and what doesn't work and what some of their desires are related to the system, and at least we'll have a better understanding of what riders think. So I think there's more than one component too, which would mean we would have to look at different strategies. So in this instance, maybe through the transportation authority, we could have them kind of take ownership of getting that information for us. And then on the question that you raised about like future riders, I think we have to come up with maybe some different questions for that group because they're not gonna have that firsthand experience as a current rider.
Maybe the suggestion that Ken offered of going to Watts and SEMCOG and having them do whatever modeling they do, give them the information that we have about future development and see if they can sort of give us a projection, a guess as to how many additional riders there might be.
Yeah, so when you do the bus surveys, do you do it for a couple of days or a week or what's a time?
I think it's at least a couple of weeks.
A couple weeks, okay. I mean, I'm just trying to get a timetable, because if we did it for 2 weeks, in March, it would have,
We have to start right away.
yeah. And then I'm thinking that you have we could target some specific large employer businesses, like Terumo, Meyer, I don't know, who else would be, has, I don't know, it might be good to do Menards and see if they're, in their employee lounges or something like that, they could put up a QR code and ask employees.
I would also hit the restaurants. I
Okay,
think,
we could do a few of those,
well,
yeah.
the impression I have from talking with some of the restaurant owners is that a challenge for them is finding workers. And
And that
probably,
is transportation.
probably transportation is a part of that.
Yeah, so, I mean, maybe there's just a targeted list of, some that are, right on the fixed route and then some that are a little further out. I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out if we're
Yeah.
trying to evaluate, we know there are parameters around costs that, and the Jackson Road corridor is probably that's the largest ridership. And, the connection issues and so forth. So I don't know if we could, do that ridership, do the businesses and do some target, at least that seems doable within this month.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, I think other questions and so forth is more of an education piece about it, because it's not like we're gonna, start new routes all the way through Scio. It's more in these really defined areas.
Yeah.
That's kind of my thinking, given time constraints and
Right.
what we can do. And just refining those questions and, and you already started with some business folk.
Well, maybe the question for the outreach to potential future riders is more long-term, because we can't, it's not a service that we could offer, even if we had the funds for it, that we could offer immediately, because the AATA would have to kind of ramp up in terms of employees and buses in order to do more for fixed route kind of service. So, I mean, we might be able to, help waive, because I saw one of those communications from Marie was saying that you guys are operating at a deficit in Scio Township.
Well, the other big employee that's off the route is ISD. That would be, the ISD would be the other big one. That isn't on a route. Yeah, so I'm thinking, if you do a couple people that are, a little off the route and then target the corridor, it'd work.
So you're thinking that if there was a new route, it might circle up to WISD?
Or it's a wave connection or something like that. Mhm. That's probably the easier one to do, because it'd be very regulated. I mean, regular. I mean, it wouldn't, they start school and stop school,
Right.
So,
it's-
Yeah, so Jan, looking at the businesses and the organizations like the WISD, are we surveying them as potential future riders? Or, I mean, are we surveying their employees, or are we surveying, I'm not clear on whether it's the business or the employees of the business.
Well, I would think that it would be the employees of the business. And now if the business may have some comment as well, I mean, owners of restaurants or whatever. But I think typically you're after
Okay.
the employees and of businesses that we know that, you know, do have ridership. And I know, there are some, because there've been those issues with not people trying to ride the bus to ASD and having walking, because they do the Scio Ridge. And then
Right.
they try and cut through.
As mentioned.
Yeah,
Oh, do they? Do they come through the woods?
well, they try. They really like that.
I bet. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have two, maybe three suggestions. One with the current writers to have AAATA maybe handle the survey of the writers over a 2-week time frame. Will that work for the two of you?
So it would be AATA.
And Wave.
And Wave,
And
both
Wave,
to
yeah.
just share it
Put
out.
too.
Okay.
I'll share it through all of our channels
Okay.
like they are.
Maybe
on
for
the
2
buses.
weeks, yeah, okay. And then as far as businesses and restaurants internally, perhaps we can notify those businesses to see if they're willing to participate and look at that same time frame. Maybe we could identify 6 to 10 and work with them in that regard.
That would at least sort of widen the pool of potential applicant or potential respondents.
Right, so, and I'm thinking we're gonna need different questions for that group.
Maybe. I mean, if the businesses are posting it in the same way that that Wave and AAATA are posting it, maybe it could be the same survey. I mean, if depending on how we frame the questions.
I was gonna say, I wonder if folks that don't ride buses, will the questions that talk in transportation speak, like
Well, that was what I
frequency?
was
and-
getting at, you know, if we're talking about restaurants and Meyer and WISD and other groups and organizations in the township, potentially they're not riders right now, so I'm thinking the questions probably should be different for them because they won't have that firsthand experience. Like if, you know, if you ask them about, you could maybe use some of the questions, but those that are directly related to the service, they're, you know, they have not had the experience, so it would be difficult for them to respond.
How hard is it? I don't do surveys, but if you had just some key questions, you know, that would sort folks, like I ride, I don't ride.
Okay,
You know,
yeah.
Can you do that?
Well, that's what I was thinking.
That's a good, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, do you
I understand
use
what you mean, but-
Yeah.
transportation, public transportation now? And then have, you know, sort of a series of questions, and if
For that
they answer,
group.
if they answer no, then skip to, you know, question
Yeah.
number 5.
About, yeah, what the barriers are, basically, you want to identify those.
Yeah, we could, I think that would make sense.
I think if they answer no, it's then potentially asking what would change your mind and what would get you to ride. Yeah, that's pretty common and
Yeah,
Who are the other? I mean, the big box stores, I guess they have a range of employees. Yeah,
you have Lowe's and Menards,
Menards, yeah.
Meyer,
Mhm.
think here.
They have one. Are there any other ones that people can think of that? I know Tarumo hires a lot of people, but they're not all at that site. But, I mean, that would be that's a different economic class kind of. There's also an industrial site that are supposed to, remember they got they're building them now. They did some sort of manufacturing, defense department manufacturing. They had a whole slew of, they were projecting a lot of employees. Yeah, it's Optiflow, yeah. But that's pretty far out.
It is, it's beyond Baker.
I don't think they're up and running yet.
Well, actually, their new campus is out in the Baker. They have an existing place, but it's a smaller operation. Well, I'm thinking that it's, maybe I'm incorrect in this assumption, but I'm guessing that, people who work in restaurants, service workers are more likely to be riding mass transit than,
Yeah, they are.
engineers who work
Yeah.
at Optiflow, but,
But that's I mean, that was assembly. The new stuff is, they're making parts making, they,
yeah, but I think it's pretty skilled,
it's scope,
pretty skilled machinist kind of work.
yeah. Well, and then probably, because if we did Tarumo, I mean,
Kind of correct a little bit what you just
Sure,
said.
please.
Younger people are more supportive of transit, and not all of them want to be driving, so there is a workforce out there of educated young people in science and management, et cetera, that, but I think my experience, my humble experience in transportation, frequency matters. And I experienced in my travels, I could walk out on Broadway and Fifth Avenue and Broadway and catch a bus in 5 minutes in New York. Okay, or train.
you didn't have to look at the
No,
schedule,
really,
you
it
just
was
went.
running, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, and we get pretty good schedules, I mean, Wave and the ATA, I think they hopefully will communicate to the public, but I think it makes a difference. Convenience is what we're fighting against. How do you get somebody to convince them to get out of their car in Michigan? So in New York, you get them to do it because parking is a bear. There's a major incentive. We don't have that problem because we're in the parking lots in
Yeah,
Michigan.
story, it's a
We'll
vehicle
store
that you
your
have
car
to
for
figure it
you.
out.
You can even park and ride.
Well, it can get tight in Ann Arbor, although it's less so now since in post-pandemic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, there might be a couple that we might want to target that aren't, but ISD High Point would be I mean, that's a range of people there. If we did Toronto, John,
Can I ask a
Romanis would probably, yeah.
Can I ask you guys very quick, when you did your marketing, surveying, asking folks what they wanted, more frequency, better hours, et cetera. Did that survey area cover Scio residents?
That predates me, so I would assume so. I would assume
Yeah.
it served the entire area which we service.
Because we're not a part of that millage, I'm just wondering if you focused in on Scio Township.
Can you
Do you know
break
that
out
for
by
sure?
area of the responses? I mean, maybe you already have some data.
Yeah, I would assume so. Probably take some digging to go back, but,
Yeah, I can definitely look into that.
yeah. I know we have top line info that I'm just trying to remember if it went through those areas. I'll have to go back and look off the top of my head. I can't remember. Chris, I did have a couple just edits.
Sure.
Happy to go through them here, probably, or I can send you emails quicker. But on the first question, it's like, if you had to choose, would you prioritize increased bus frequency or increased bus hours? Probably recommend either going increased buses per hour or expanded bus hours. And then on the on-demand service, we probably recommend door-to-door service. I think most people will understand more what that means.
Door to door, yeah.
And then the next couple of questions, it's like, if you could add more fixed routes stops, what additional stops would you suggest? Please list as many as you like. I find with surveys, ABC, you gotta give them like, click here, click that. So it's, would more fixed route services increase the frequency in which you ride? Kind of you'll start to lose people when you're asking them more expounded questions. So, and I'd probably cut the next two from that. I'm just trying to think as far as getting people to actually
Right.
respond. The longer you keep them on, the less interested and less
Right.
they're gonna wanna keep building. And then for, how long are you willing to wait at bus stops? When we always do this, it'd be 0 to 5, 5 to,
Yeah.
you know,
No, you give
15,
them some
like you give them
time
some time.
frames to-
So that they just click,
And that
it's
also
a click, it's not a right.
Like, and it reverts
Right.
back to your frequency question and kind of helps you answer some of those.
If you could send that to me.
Yeah, I'll email,
That'd be
yeah.
great.
So you make the adjustments and everything?
Sure.
Okay, and can you send it to all of us?
Yes.
Okay, so I guess the other comment I have too, you know, if we're gonna look at businesses in the area, the surrounding area. You know, one is to get feedback from their employees on our survey document, but the other, we talked about the Go Pass at the last meeting, and we could look at actually getting feedback from the businesses as far as whether that's something that would be of interest to them.
And I think Lillian from our team did email over a document with kind of the preliminary information that would be needed to start to look at it.
Yes. Yep. she did.
For the Go
Did
Pass.
all of us or just?
No, I think it may have just been Jeff and I.
Okay.
Oh, was it? I didn't
think
look.
got it.
Yeah.
It could have been, because whoever submitted the initial inquiry to her.
I'll forward it on.
Okay,
I will forward that on.
Okay. Okay, so it sounds like maybe early next week, we should take a look at, and Jeff, maybe you could help us with that as well, the survey document refined to give the option related to those that use the service and those that do not, and then the questions.
sure. Yeah, I'm happy to take a look. I think the one thing that the RIDE wants to keep in mind is like, we don't want to look like we're writing the survey
Right.
or anything like
Right.
that. So, yeah, just to make it, put that out there. But no, I'm happy to, give kind of professional opinion on what you think you'll get the most responses to.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Okay,
So the plan is for us to continue to refine the questions and work with Jeff and Shasta.
Shasta, yeah, to get the information out, we're gonna do the survey over a 2-week period, once we get those questions.
And then maybe
developed.
work with the DDA to get it out to businesses along, a selection of businesses along Jackson Road.
Now, when you say work with the DDA, are we asking them to do it, or what exactly is it that we're asking them to do?
Well, I have the impression that Bob Stites, the chair of the DDA, is pretty connected to businesses along the Jackson
Okay.
Road corridor. So I was thinking of working through him to reach out to them with whatever our ask is of the businesses.
Okay.
And are you thinking of the, for both the employer and the employee, so the Go
Yeah,
Pass
both.
piece and for them to post the employee thing?
I think so. We're trying to get all of that information, although
Yeah,
it maybe the Go Pass is something that's gonna take more time to sort of figure out what you'll see when you get it, the sort of the response from the person at AAGA, is it Lily?
Yeah, so and the document she sends pretty robust. I think there's a lot that's,
It's sort
yeah,
of a step by step,
Yeah.
here's what the local community does in order to, go through the process of establishing a Go Pass. And so I think, it's more of a process certainly than we have time to go through before we have to make a recommendation to the board, but in some ways, it seems like something that could almost occur independent of the
Mhm.
millage, because it's kind of a standalone program.
So it's an option that's available. that
Yeah,
we-
it's
You
something.
say we
that-
want the information pre or post.
Well, yeah, I
Maybe
think
not
so.
complicate what we're trying to do now,
Yeah, I
because it
think
isn't necessary for the millage.
Do
I
we
don't
have the
think- I don't
time
think-
in all
I don't
honesty?
think we wanna try and take this on between now and the end of March, but I think it's a great idea to explore with the businesses
Businesses.
in Scio and see if there's interest in doing something like this.
And I'd be glad to be, because I don't think ISD is in the DDA. So I'm glad to give them the info and to survey there.
Well, it's sort of a leap for WISD because they're not in the Jackson Road corridor. They're not even, within easy walking
They
distance.
probably have the most employees.
They're not even within the Route 26 or 29.
Yeah, that's
When
what I
they go to, because that would be nice if that route went up to Wagner.
I don't know if
To
Marie got
Fire
any
Church
comments
down
back from
instead of
ISD, because she did reach out to them, I think.
Did you not know, but I can ask her.
I didn't get it, I didn't get an email back, so it may have been not a good time.
Well, I know when it comes to schools, we cannot set up a stop at schools. We're not allowed to set up a stop at schools. But we have some, like, we have one not far from Chelsea schools and Dexter schools, but we are not allowed to set them up on schools. She told me that this week. We can't have a stop on school properties. I think it's because of school buses. I can have her explain it more, just I'll message her.
Well, Shasta, I was wondering, because one of the things I noticed in the data from Wave is that you have a lot of riders from North Parker.
Mhm.
Isn't that where the Dexter schools are? Like the high school? I was just wondering if that was a data point that indicated there was a lot of use by teenagers living in Dexter. Especially since the other data point was there's a lot of stops at Taco Bell. And I was like.
There's a
It's like a
relationship.
route between-
Is that a new route?
I can get the breakup by age. A majority of our riders right now are people, seniors or people with disabilities. We're currently in process of working with the schools, trying to figure out how their students could use ours because all the schools around us in our coverage area, or at least quite a few of them are experiencing bus driver issues. So like Chelsea canceled routes. They would pick one or two routes a week and would cancel them throughout the school year. And Dexter had put in the paper that they're possibly not giving as many kid rides next year. They're gonna expand out who can get rides. So we are working with them about how we can put stops where we can help the kids more. We just cannot have them at school district center.
So,
But we do not have a lot. I mean, we have some high schoolers, but not a lot. We're
Okay.
currently working with the schools to try to increase that.
So that doesn't
So
explain
if
the
you
North
can't-
Parker data point.
so if you can't be near the school.
We can't go to school property
Okay,
because the school buses do. We have like
okay, so that might be a
Dexter,
problem.
like on Dexter on, Acre Road, I'll have her, I'm gonna ask her right now, cause she's in training, but she said to message her, so I'll make sure she sends me an explanation. In Dexter, we have a spot, I believe that's right, like by the elementary schools, cause you know, the roads are there, we just cannot have it at the schools. I'll find out
There's no
why.
way you could have a stop on Wagner.
Right, there's no sidewalks or anything on Wagner. Would be difficult. Yeah. So that may not be an option at this point.
Unless you get the path from Scio Ridge.
That would have to be like something that HOA would probably have to
Mhm.
agree to. Sure, where
Okay.
you cut through someone's yard, or is there?
There's a condo. Is it, are there condos there?
Uplands?
Maybe it's the uplands.
There are, you're right, there's a condo development.
It's a condo. It's
West
a
side.
condo that coming through that condo area would be, because, just because they have an association.
Right.
Okay, while we're waiting for Shasta to get a response, why don't we move on to item 4, to try to keep the agenda moving? Thank you. Any new information, Ken, or not? Since our last meeting?
I do have a couple things that came through a little bit before the meeting, so I can pass those out through an
Okay.
email like that. It's more related to cost type things, so probably something that once we get some of the survey stuff back, it'll be really helpful for those discussions.
Okay, do you think we should discuss it today or wait until we get the information? It's up to you.
I can,
Well, do you have the information? You
Yeah,
don't
we
have
have
it
it.
yet.
I don't-
You do
yeah.
have it.
so it was when we asked for the kind of the cost differences between some of the types of services. So, just a second, one more email. For fixed route. The hourly cost for fixed route right now for AATA is $114.70 an hour.
114
Yes,
and 70 cents.
yes.
Per hour.
Yes.
That's per rider.
No, that's in
Per
service
hour.
hour. Chris has the per rider cost. So that means for an hour that a bus is on the street, that's how much it costs for that hour.
Okay,
And then the next one is Flex Ride. Flex Ride is $54 per hour. And then the cost per trip on Flex Ride, so you can compare that against, you know, the number that Chris came up with, is $58 a trip. And then, do you remember Gold Ride, the senior oriented service? The reason why there's a $20 fare on that is because the cost for that is $257 a trip.
Because it costs what?
It's $257 a trip to provide a Gold Ride trip.
but the
200.
Person pays 20,
57.
kind of as an incentive to steer them toward other services.
And that's 257 per hour.
Trip.
Oh, per trip.
With a
Yeah.
$20 copay.
The 250. Who pays that?
The agency. So out of the 257, 237 of that are covered by the agency, and then $20 is covered by the rider.
Okay, so it would be like the township if they sponsored the program. Okay,
I believe some of that is probably covered by state, you know, the state subsidies that we get for all service, so that number might be a little lower, but worst case scenario, it's $237.
And what was the $58 per trip?
58 was Flex Ride, door-to-door service.
Door to door.
so can you did say you sent that to us already?
I haven't yet.
But
but
can
I
you send it to us and summarize it?
Yep.
Okay, all right.
So that should give kind of a, you know, an overview of what it costs for the different types of services. And then Marie sent out the stuff, similar information for the wage services too. So that'll give you a feeling for kind of the differences between what the
Yeah.
different modes cost.
I have a question for you. The 114.70 per hour for our fixed route, you say that's now, is that including 2004? I mean, 2024?
That's for the current fiscal year.
Current, okay.
And then our fiscal years are aligned with federal, so we are October through September.
Right, that's the post, so that's why we're talking about it in the fall.
Okay.
Exactly.
So that actually reminds me of this other question that Chris and I were kind of bumping up against, and that is, is it possible to project out? I mean, we only have the POSA for the next 2 years showing what the amount is for Scio Township. Is it possible to sort of extend that out for the full life of the millage, for example? So if the millage, if we put it on the ballot and it's to be renewed and to run from next year through, 10 years, what would each year, can we project that out?
Yeah, I think it got buried in some of the email chains. So question, and we can do this through email if I can't make any sense. The question was, is that what Forrest had originally started with was the increased hours on the weekends. So you want a projection of that? And then based on the discussion that we had last time, do you want a projection if the service was to stay at the same hours and frequency as it is right now?
No, I
Or do
think,
you want both of them?
well, I think what Chris and I were, I don't know that I can answer that question because it's in some ways it's sort of a group question. But I think what Chris and I were sort of aiming at in our conversation is, what at, sort of keeping the service level sort of
As it is.
as it is, but obviously AATA is sort of increasing that based on the county millage funding, right? What you're talking about for the POSA is a more frequent service with slightly longer hours. So I think that's sort of what we're measuring, because if I understand correctly, you're not really offering Scio Township a different schedule. I mean, certainly AAATA would prefer not to offer Scio Township a different schedule than you're having throughout your rest of your system. You want consistency. So what would that cost if you projected that out for the 10 years? And then I guess it would also be helpful to know what it would cost if,
We just wanted status quo.
well, I don't even know if that's really an option. Can we just have status quo? I
Well,
mean,
yeah, we can have status quo, but we wanted to know how much that would cost too.
So when you say status quo, are you talking about what we currently have?
Yeah, Monday,
And-
7 days a week, the same schedule.
That we have right now, instead of having the enhanced level
That's
as
correct.
of November.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I
So
think,
both.
well, I don't know. We've already signed a POSA for this new level of service.
So that's a given.
Oh, I
right?
didn't know
Because
that.
it's
I thought
based
that's what we were here
on
to
all of your
discuss.
routing.
No, I think what we're here to
well, I.
we did raise a question of, could we
Reevaluate.
tinker with the schedule for Scio Township? And we did have
a
some
conversation.
feedback since our last meeting, which we haven't really shared out in the full group, but the answer from AAATA is that presents a whole sort of list of problems for AAATA. One of them being that you would have a very difficult time sort of crafting a different schedule on top of the schedule that the rest of your system is going to be following. But also, you went through a public input process that arrived at this schedule. And so if you were gonna put forward something else to riders, then I think what I took from our conversation is that you would need to sort of go back and do over the public input.
And so if I'm remembering correctly, Forrest's suggestion was at least do a year. I mean, it'd be great if we could just continue that through the 10-year cycle, but I think what Forrest said was, let's at least put it out there for a year so that we could evaluate, and then if we need to re-engage and adjust the schedules, we can go through that process and then do it at that time.
I can't remember what Forrest's.
That's
proposal
what he
was.
said.
Okay, that is what he said, okay.
Yeah,
So I could have him do the projections for expanded service and then flat, current service as well.
you mean, have him do 2 scenarios?
Mhm.
Okay, so one with the enhanced services starting later this year, and one with what we currently have over the 10-year period, in order to see what the cost might be
Yes.
to the township.
Yep.
Okay,
Well, and
So,
then I guess the other question is, what would the proposal look like projected out? If, say, in year 5,
We go down.
we went up. We expanded service further out Jackson. Because I think it's clear, the need for that may not be manifest until a lot of this housing is built. But it would be helpful to know how much more it would cost when we're calculating what kind of millage we want to put out there.
So the piece that I need from that, from the group is, can you give me, we just say to Baker Road, can we give like a little bit more specific detail of what that actually means for route? Like, does
so
that
if you stopped at Baker Road, you'd have to go beyond Baker
just turn around?
and come around, through the Michigan U. And then if you run late, there's even a pullover off from there. I
Okay,
mean,
so,
that's under
but
construction.
are we talking going north across the freeway or anything like that, or just out Baker, turn around and then come back? Okay, yeah, okay.
That's why I was saying a half hour to do that from my route. seems
Okay,
More, but what do I know? I would ask you, this letter that we have from, I think November 23rd, where, Forrest was giving us these numbers, that little chart at the bottom, and it said fiscal year 24, 25. Those numbers, or that number, that $580,690 reflects, that figure reflects the cost of the first year of going with the updated service.
For the part that overlaps your fiscal year, yes,
Okay,
just to make it nice and complicated.
okay, but that's built, I'm just saying that's
Yes.
built into there,
Yep.
that 580,650, okay. And I want to revisit something else, 'cause, we talked about this transfer at Meyer between Wave and, ATA, and what, I was thinking about, I forget who said it, but the response was, is that that's all fair decisions are, in the purview of of the AATA board. So we have a contract with you. We're not asking you to change the fare. Well, I guess we are in the sense that we're talking about. I'm just kind of trying to flush that out in my mind, how that works and that board domain or scope having to affect our contract with you. But I guess that's how you.
So Shasta, question. On when it's listed out, there's some options listed on the website about a fare, if you go and make a transfer between the two systems. There's two costs listed there, if I'm remembering correctly, so is that just adding what a wave fare is and then adding an AATA on top of it?
Yes, and vice versa.
Okay, so as long as we're not talking about actually, charging AATA side of it $1.25 or $1.75, as long as that doesn't, as long as we're not adjusting those fares up and down, then the board doesn't.
No, we wouldn't touch anybody's fare.
Okay,
What the idea is that if you're coming from, Scio Farms and you're on the Wave bus and you really want to go downtown Ann Arbor or downtown Ipsy. So you transfer at Meyer and get on the AATA bus and paying an additional fare. And same thing, when you want to come home from downtown Ann Arbor, you don't want to pay fare to AATA. And then have to pay an additional fare to Wave to get to Scio Farms. That's what we have now. So in keeping with your structure of every system you have and every locale that you have it in, I don't know about Flex right now, but where your fixed route bumps up against Ipsy locals is a good example. Whatever, you do a transfer to get to where you want to go. So this is that's what I was thinking about, that we just do a transfer instead of paying the double fare. Now, that means one way you're gonna get the money, the other way Wave's gonna get the money. It does affect the fare, I'm not trying, but we're not telling you to change your fare structure, we're just asking that it be a transfer.
okay.
It makes sense to us. Same thing if once we get this apartment complex up at Baker
Mhm.
and on Jackson Road, just east of Baker, that would be the same thing. You can get on the ATA bus, the Wave bus up. Now, if the system is how it is now, that your buses don't go to Baker. If your buses go to Baker, then it's a moot point. But anyway, the way it's configured right now is if there were people living in that complex, they would pay Wave, use a transfer, get on your bus. When they came home, they paid AATA, use a transfer to get on the Wave bus.
So,
But you can ride both under that scenario.
but then it seems like
That's
what
what
we,
you're
what we
saying,
would
Kate.
need to know is what would be the fiscal impact for both Wave and AATA of foregoing the fares
So would
that they would otherwise get.
The fares make up a very minimal part of what they get. The taxpayers funding transit, federal and the state, and,
So maybe it's a relatively marginal issue in terms of the finances of the two services, but it
Well, I
probably, it
think
does
that's-
make a difference to the riders.
I think that's something for ATA to consider. But for us, I would like our riders to be able to ride like that. That's what I'm
That would,
talking
you know,
about.
that
So,
would
so
actually
they
be an
just pay the full
advancement.
fare when they boarded and get the transfer.
Whatever way, the fares are different, so I'm not trying to
Mhm.
No, I
pass
get it.
over
I
that.
get it.
It's 50 cents to ride Wave, it's $1.50 to ride AATA. So if they're coming to work from Scio, Top Farms, they're gonna pay 50 cents to get a transfer, not pay any more fare, just use their transfer to AT's bus, go to Ann Arbor. When they come home, they'll pay the Ann Arbor transit fare. So that's their first get on, then they're gonna transfer to Wave and not pay the 50 cents.
But as you pointed out, most of the cost of at least the AATA fixed route is borne by Scio Township through our POSA, right? Our millage that we collect and pay annually. And the question, I guess, is how much of that is passing through to Wave? And it sounds like from what Marie wrote in her email, not enough.
Yeah, our routes running a deficit. right
Yeah,
now.
to cover the cost of those routes.
I have an update from Marie really quick if you guys want me to give.
Let me just say this, Marie is in favor of no fares. So I don't think Marie is worried about this. As a matter of fact, she said it, she'd agree to that. She's even told me she would. Anyway, she would be happy to do
I mean,
that.
it sounds like it would be a good option to offer riders. I mean, I don't know how many would actually use it, but it would be good to do that. I think, that's one of the options we might want to look at.
So it sounds like a procedure change of Wave just taking AATA transfer tickets and then vice versa.
Vice versa.
Yeah,
Okay,
okay.
yeah, let me take that back.
Does Wave currently offer transfer tickets or is
We've
that something?
not, but we're open to it. I mean, Marie is open to it
Okay.
very much.
That's just getting it printed.
Yeah.
That's.
I print all the time. I print most of our print marketing, so printing stuff is not a problem.
Or
I
you
went
might
to-
even use an AATA, because you'd be transferring to AATA, you might even use AATA transfer tickets.
Yeah, they would.
Yeah.
They would.
Yeah,
And they would have a date on them.
yeah, I
So
think
that,
that's.
you know, you don't get people trying to get around it. And it has to say eastbound, westbound, so you don't have, you know, so you can't use your one you
Right.
got this morning that you didn't use because your buddy picked you up along the way instead. But anyway, whatever. There's all kind of ways.
All those little scams.
No, all the scams.
Well, I see a few in my day.
We have Kim on our team here. So Kim, you kind of brought us into the next item. on the
Yeah, I'm sorry.
agenda, which-
That's been burning in
Oh,
my brain.
Yeah, let's hear Shasta with, the information that Marie shared.
The bus, it's.
We can have stops at schools. Schools just can't pay us to transport their kids. Community Connector already has stops at Dexter schools. We do not track by age except if they're a senior, because our reports show senior disabilities or other rider. But, I mean, I could talk to our drivers and ask them if a lot of teenagers do it. And then another thing for your survey, I want to say quick, because like I said, I have to leave because my son's birthday party's in less than 3 hours. I have to go set up for it. But if someone sends me a Zoom link, I'll still talk to you guys and answer questions for this meeting. But I will talk to our drivers too, if you want, and ask them like if a lot of teenagers ride. And then what I have found since I've hired in at Wave is the drivers tend to be one of my best, resources. They come and say, hey, riders are talking about this, or this is what we're looking for as drivers. And I've been focused on that and it's helped me make a lot of improvements since I've been here. So I'll talk to our drivers and let you guys know what they're saying about if teenagers are riding. And about suggestions for these routes down here, any suggestions riders have had that brought up to them, because that's real concerns they bring up to drivers, so I could ask them about that.
Well,
and send it to them.
Actually, anything that drivers, can tell us about riding, the riders within Scio Township, I think would be interesting to know.
Well, we can also ask them to fill out a survey too, as with the other riders. Well,
Pardon?
we can get their comments on the survey too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
I'll Zoom link this and do someone else. I'll log into it, 'cause I have YouTube.
Yeah.
Look, there's teachers up there.
I'll get it for it and I'll be logged in next Friday.
All right.
It's my son's birthday today.
No,
I'm going
we
ready for his
understand.
party.
Okay, so as far as, item 5 on the agenda, we were talking about other options at our last meeting. And Kim brought up the transfer as one of the enhancements that we could offer as part of the, program. What other options are we interested in looking at? I think we need to kind of move this along a little bit, so.
Well, it seems like the transfer is something that if
Right.
AATA and Wave both agreed to it, that that could be implemented relatively easily, but some of these other options like the Go Pass, I think is gonna take more work.
Yeah. What about the flex ride? We talked about that at our last meeting. It's something to offer in the township. Right now, we're not offering that.
So I think
Am I
that would,
correct?
correct. Well, Wave is offering door to door throughout the whole township, so I think
It's the equivalent to.
So Wave and A-Ride,
Yes,
they're
that's,
A-Ride too.
so, right, but A-Ride is specific to people
Seniors
that
and
qualify
disabled.
under the ADA,
Yes.
so, but
Okay.
Wave service is open to, anybody that can use it, so I guess the question for the group is, would you want an overlapping service on top of that was branded AATA, or were you
That's a
guys
good
thinking
point.
more how to enhance Wave's
yeah.
stuff?
Right,
It sounds like,
exactly. That's a
now,
good
I
point.
guess, Kim, with Wave, if there was a substantial increase in participation, are you able to accommodate?
I don't know, but I'll follow up on that.
Okay, and that might be how we answer that question.
Okay.
Okay.
So
I thought-
so I guess that gets down to door to door we're talking about right now.
Door to door.
Is right now, does Wave give us 2 buses every hour or 2 buses all day? I mean, what does the level of service require in terms of driver and bus? And so then we can put a price on it, because right now we just know they pick up people. We don't know, because is it like just 1 bus is dedicated for that and is doing all those trips every month?
You're talking about the door to door.
The door to door at Wave, yes. And I think that would give us a better clue, and I'll kind of flush that out with Marie. I think that'll give us a better clue about how much could, if we wanted to say, we want to pay for another bus, so we want,
And
we
then
want to,
what that
broaden-
usually means.
Yeah, and
Our
is that, how
service.
much of that,
and how much does that cost?
yeah, and how
Right,
much
and I think that was
expansion
the-
is within just.
That was the question the last time, in our meeting is,
Yeah.
whether Wave would be able to accommodate if we had quite a few other riders.
Well, we asked
Let's
her
say
to-
we advertise the service.
We asked her to give us an idea what that would cost.
Mhm.
And she was letting us know in email that she's been busy, some training, and she hadn't been able to,
Mhm.
she answered some other stuff, but hadn't been able to get those figures for us. So I will get back with you about that.
Okay,
Okay.
and then what I do recall, Ken, at our last meeting, you had mentioned that the flex ride, that process might be more available because you were setting up a new system with AATA with.
Getting a new vendor.
Yeah, new vendor. So how would that work? If that was the other option to consider, or to consider both options?
So the way that we do it currently right now, is similar to what Wave does. You put a certain number of vehicles out there, and then increasing the number of vehicles. This is, can give you a shorter wait time, can give you a more accurate window of when the vehicle is gonna show up, as opposed to saying, we'll be here in 30 minutes. You could say with extra vehicles, we'll be here within 10 minutes.
Or it allows you to provide more trips.
Right,
So sometimes what the numbers don't tell you is, they don't have on the charts, they don't tell you how many times that they had to turn people away, because they didn't, that bus was tied up with something else. So that affects availability, frequency too.
Yeah, how much capacity is there?
and so the only difference that we have probably between us and what Wave does is we just use Golden Limo has a service they call Mode Car,
Yeah,
and so we just.
and we do
contract
that
with them.
too. When we decline, we have another backup to send people to, and I forget the name of the service. It's not that one, but.
So it's pretty similar. It's just who do you contract with to provide the service? If that makes sense.
So, and what we probably would like from Marie is, what's the declination rate? How many times
Oh,
Other times they turn people
a
away.
month are you turning people away? Because
right.
that would give us a better sense of need too. It was like, oh, it
Yeah,
happens
kinda,
once or
yeah.
twice a year.
Right.
We
right.
know the service is not being overly used.
Unmet demand.
Right, and where those denials, where those requests are coming from geographically, get denied.
So you have that same problem. where you're denying riders.
And that's one of the
Oh,
reasons
yeah,
why we're
that's it.
changing vendors and models and stuff like that, because our current way that we reimburse them right now is we just pay them for as long as the vehicle is out there, with no incentives to put people together on, trip chain and make sure that there's more than one person on a vehicle, so.
So is that an option that we are interested in? You know, given some of the complexities of availability.
Well, the option of, if I remember correctly from our earlier meeting, a much earlier meeting, there's a kind of a service area around a fixed route that can bring people to that fixed route, or just, is that the door-to-door service that's available within a certain proximity
fixed
of,
route.
within the fixed
So
route?
that's the.
How do I raise my puppy?
That's the ADA-based service called A-Ride.
Uh-huh.
That is available to anybody that qualifies with disabilities and with age. That is a fixed area around it's a defined area around the fixed routes, 3/4 of a mile, but with Flex Ride, or if you were to use Wave as door-to-door service, you guys can define that service area however you want. And then depending on what you want for level of service, like how quickly your vehicle can be there and how many seats it has available, that would determine the number of vehicles that you would need within that defined area. So the smaller the geographic area, the more quickly you can get out there and the more people you can move around.
So it's only that ADA service that is within proximity of the fixed route, and
Yeah.
in Scio Township, it's sort of contracted out to Wave.
Yep.
Okay.
No, no.
No.
The ADA service, we have another contractor that does that. It's its own specific
Oh,
contract.
okay, so it's not Wave that's doing that in Scio
Cause it's
Township.
probably a special vehicle, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're not really talking about that. We're talking about some expansion of Wave service, most likely, in Scio Township.
Mhm.
And I guess the question is, what that would cost.
Can you guys hear me? This is Shasta.
Oh, hi Shasta.
Hi, Shasta.
Okay, so all of Wave's vehicles are ADA compliant, including our door-to-door minivans. And we do have deviations currently on the Jackson Road corridor, and they do max out some days, and we have to turn down routes or turn down deviations where we go to their door. We will pick up people. We have, if you look at your schedules I gave you, if you look at Jackson Road connector, there's a deviation section, and that's where we'll go pick people up within 3/4 of a mile of the route and take them on the route. That does max out, and they do have to turn them down, and I can make sure we get those numbers for you to tell you how often we turn them down, because we track all of that.
And is that in addition to door to door?
Yes, the deviations are actually, as you can see, added into the route, that fixed route and one other fixed route of ours will do deviations within 3/4 of a mile, but we can only do so many with the time we have on the current route.
And so just so I'm making sure I understand, you have door to door service to Scio, and you also have this deviation stuff on our fixed route.
Well, no, we thought we had we don't have door to door right now. Marie had talked to you guys about it in that last email where she did break down what the cost would be for currently for 2024 and 2025. And when she, also
Okay, I don't need that. I can look that up. But right
no,
now, because wait a
in
minute.
that email, she explained. In
No,
that
I
email,
want
she
you to
said we
just
have
answer my
currently have
question.
deviations. Yeah, we have deviations. We do not have door to door.
Okay, because we've been talking about door to door
Yeah,
for
that's what
over
we're talking.
Yeah.
almost a month now. So, okay, that's good to know. I'm glad I asked the question.
All right, so, so just to kind of wrap up on options. It sounds like the transfer might be one that we could offer between Wave and AATA. And then on the, flex ride or day-to-day, I'm not sure where we're at. Is that something that we should consider as part of any recommendation going forward? And
Okay.
I'm asking the question. Because I'm thinking if we're gonna offer it is something where if residents contact either agency, they should get a response. And if you can't respond, you might have a third party partner with another organization, so.
And Kim, can you get a clarification from Marie on that? Cause I'm not fully understanding the map that's on the Wave site. There's stuff that's listed there. There's a whole door-to-door thing, and then there's stuff that's listed here, so,
So clarification on this map, right?
Yeah.
Stop. Those are just your service area.
so everything out here technically isn't in the,
It's in our service area.
this is too?
The tan is our service area, the white is.
So there is door-to-door stuff there.
Well, there is door to door in some of the service areas, but there's not door to door in Scio,
Okay, so
other
with
than
all
these
of this-
deviations.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, okay.
So,
Thank you.
so it
Yeah,
sounds like,
I'm saying thank you.
Yeah.
Because I.
so it sounds like you need to know if you can offer that service as part of any package we present to the board.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for the clarification.
I just want to make sure I understand, Joyce. So the first thing you said was, as an option would be basically the current combination of Wave and AAATA to handle traffic along the fixed route of the Jackson corridor.
Right.
So from Meyer west would be Wave, and from
Meyer
Meyer
to
east
to
would-
Baker.
yeah, from Meyer west to Baker would be Wave,
Mhm.
and from Meyer east towards Ann Arbor would be AAATA.
Right.
Now, that route,
whole
the Jackson corridor connector goes from Parker Road,
Uh-huh.
Thornton Farms, right? To Jackson Plaza down by IHA building.
So there's a little bit of overlap
That's correct,
between
Yeah.
Waves routes. It doesn't just terminate at Meyer.
correct.
Okay,
It's just that we were trying to figure out how we could do a little bit better with the wage to cost thing, and then, also, we'd also talked about trying to plug that Meyer to Baker better. Now, Wave already covers that, but they do it every 2 hours.
so it's currently, so Wave is every 2 hours currently,
Yep,
and currently
no door to door, but
AAATA is every half
Half
hour.
during the day, Monday through Friday. And at night, is it every hour?
Yes.
And the
Every
new,
hour
and the
at
new, and the new expanded, not expanded service, the new plan, the new schedule is every 15 minutes.
No,
Yeah,
it's a half
30
hour on the
minutes.
weekends.
Oh, every half hour on the weekend.
But it'd still be every hour at night,
Correct.
so weekends would be every half hour instead of.
If you guys look at those schedules I gave you today, if you look at the two buses we have go up and down, and the only stop that's different is the community connector, which goes up and down Baker Road. And Marie had added in that email what the cost would be to add stops on Baker Road, because we already have a bus go down it to Jackson Road.
Yeah.
If you look between the community connector and the Jackson Road connector, we actually go down Jackson Road every hour between those two buses.
Well,
That's why I brought the schedule
Yeah.
today.
That bus goes from Thornton Farms, each of those buses goes from Thornton Farms all the way to
Okay,
Jackson
No,
Plaza.
no. The community connector, because it goes through Decker and comes up Baker Road, it turns from Baker Road and turns onto Jackson Road towards,
West.
Meyer and Scio Farms. The community connector does not go to Thornton Farms, but every other one of our Jackson Road stops between the two buses, they go to every other stop, the same stop. The
Yeah,
only
that's the
one that the
problem
Jackson-
with that kind of
okay.
complicated schedule.
So-
But anyway, it's not frequent.
Yeah, so Marie did send an email today, no, it was yesterday. And she says, your request for Baker Road stops is doable with our community connector coming down Baker Road already. For accurate pricing, she said she needs to know more about the locations you want, where you want your stops to add. And if there are any stops you want removed. Then she says these routes cost between $66 and $75 an hour. So if the service increased a total of 1 hour a day, 7 days a week, the cost would be $24,000 to $27,500 for Scio. So,
So I guess I feel like we're kind of sometimes talking about different stuff than we talked about before. So maybe it's just me, but like door to door for one, but, it feels like,
Well, that's why I was trying to really
Yeah.
get to what the options are.
Yeah.
right.
So that we can kind of focus on that and.
Oh, I know what it was I was gonna say. I don't remember any discussion talking about putting stops on Baker Road.
We didn't talk about that. But what she's saying, I think what she's saying here is that it's something they could look at from Jackson to Baker. But to determine what the cost is, she needs to know more about where the stops will be. I think that's what she's saying here.
Oh, because it doesn't say that. Okay, but, okay.
Yeah.
No, that
Because they
email,
already go down from Thornton Farms to Jackson. They already do the route we want. It's the frequency we want to change, not necessarily something along Baker. Apparently that other connector goes down Baker Road, fine, but that's not what we're trying to achieve.
Well,
That's why I'm
except,
getting a little confused here.
well, no, in this meeting and in the last one, like today, you guys talked to AAATA about stopping on Baker Road. In the last meeting, you had spoke to both of us and asked us to send you costs of what it would be to go to Baker Road. So that's why she added that this time, that we do have a bus that goes up and down it.
I don't remember that, but obviously I missed that.
well, if I'm understanding correctly, there's two sort of scheduled routes. There's the Jackson Road connector and there's the community connector. And both of them go down Jackson Road, is that correct? So,
Yes, the Jackson Road
Both of them go to
connector
Meyer.
goes,
Both of them go to Meyer, isn't that correct?
yes, so Jackson Road connector is specifically only on Jackson Road between Thornton Farms and Parkland Plaza. Where the community connector goes on all the stops on Jackson Road except Thornton Farms, but it also goes through Dexter and Chelsea. So that's the one that pulls Dexter and Chelsea into Scio Township. We
So,
bring people from Dexter and Chelsea to Scio Township is what that bus does. And then it goes all the way down Jackson Road. It just doesn't hit Thornton Farms like Jackson Road connector does.
so to answer our question, if we're just, because we're not really thinking about Thornton Farms
Right.
or going north
Yeah.
on Baker. We're just thinking about Jackson
Jackson Road.
Road between Baker and Meyer, really.
That's basically.
I mean, the fact that you go further on one of your
And that's what she's
services
saying
is
here.
sort of, it's okay. I mean,
Yeah.
but really to answer our question about extending service between Meyer and Baker,
Mhm.
we'd have to look at both of these routes and kind of add them together to know
So-
how frequently Wave is
Yeah.
hitting that area.
so what, I'm looking at your Monday through Friday schedule for the Jackson Road. And I realize now that that's a separate, so that's every 2 hours on the Jackson Road corridor. Connector, I apologize, you call it the Jackson Road connector. And then you're talking about the community connector, and that's what I had not kind of thrown together. I'm looking for that map, Monday to Friday, yep.
And so the community connector that is the earlier bus.
Yeah, 6 it's well, by the time it gets to Meyer, or let's say it's.
But it's not really good for
Scio
morning
Farms.
commutes.
It's at Scio Farms at 6, the first bus is at 6:29 at Scio Farms, going east. Cause it leaves Chelsea at 6.
Ah,
See that?
yep, I got it now. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
so that's sort of the commuter
And
one.
then the next one's at 8:29, that's 2 hours later, Scio Farms. Now, the question is do they complement each other? You got a bus at 6,
That's
and
what I'm-
then you
that's
got a
what I'm
bus
trying to get
at Meyer and then, but you don't have a time point, so. When
If
that
you
bus,
look between the two schedules, one of those two buses that each one of the stops every hour. They're alternated so that they're at Scio Farms every hour.
So there's
Each
the
bus
answer.
is there every 2 hours, but between the two, there is a Wave bus at each stop in Scio Township that we have every hour.
Hour
One
frequency.
stops, then like an hour later, the next one stops, then the first one comes back 2 hours later. So it's every hour between the two buses, the same stop.
What we have from AAATA is every 30 minutes.
so,
Sounds like, Kim, what you might be thinking about is maybe bumping up the Jackson Road one, Jackson corridor. For the wave option. would be increasing the frequency of the Jackson corridor route.
To match AAATA.
Yeah, I was thinking of what would it cost us? I mean, this all was about generated this conversation. What would it cost us for Wave to bump up our frequency? Okay, on their Jackson corridor routes. Now,
To
and now
match.
today I realize it's two doing that, and Shasta says it's an hour. And I can kind of do that on my own time, look at the times, but I'm just take your word for it, Shasta. So they were still not at the every half hour
Right.
Right,
on that.
so there's current level of service, which is, I guess, wave every hour for that segment that isn't done by AATA and AATA every 30 minutes. And the question is, I guess one question is what it would take for Wave to increase their frequency to match AATA, so you have the same frequency along that whole route, which would
mean every-
basically be extending
every
service.
hour.
That was the
That
question.
was the question.
Are you
Currently every hour.
Okay, well, she answered that question in this email. She said,
The 27.
yeah, this is 27.5.
Okay.
We got the
Okay.
information.
So 27.5.
Five. Mhm.
Now, is the daily and the time? Does do the hours also match and the weekends or no?
Well, she says.
I don't think the frequency, I was just looking at that earlier. And no, they're there like a few minutes later, like it's not, they're both there at 8:15.
No, but that's not so much, but do they go as late at night and have the same weekend service too?
I don't think there's Shasta, correct me if I'm right, I don't think, well, it's right here in the schedule.
If you look at the second,
Yeah.
if you look at the second page in there,
Yeah,
that's
there's-
the Saturday on one side, Sunday
Oh,
on the other.
Sunday, that's what it is, Saturday,
Yeah,
Sunday,
that's
gotcha,
on different pages,
gotcha.
yeah. And the community connector is the same, Saturday and
And
Sunday.
Sunday, okay, thank you,
Okay,
can't
All right.
read.
so
The bus
moving right along. Let's move on.
Alright, we got a good list here.
Literacy here.
But I
So-
just want to make sure I'm understanding the options that you were trying to lay
Yeah,
out. here.
yeah, the flex time, we talked about that, transfers, and it sounds like maybe the other option is trying to look at the frequency between Jackson and Baker through Wade
Yeah, because it seems like it's within our reach.
for 27,000.
Yeah, it's not that big a difference in cost
Right.
and the experience for the rider would be the same if there was a transfer.
Right.
Right.
Because
It
they
would be-
would be paying,
So it would be
actually
more cost
less than they are
effective,
now
yeah.
to have that service.
Right,
And that would be, I mean, that, I think people would really appreciate that.
yeah.
We can skip the
Except
survey.
for they won't have to. And they
Just
still,
have
you know.
information.
Yeah, I know.
All right, so,
That's really, it cuts right to the chase.
yes. Let me see if I missed anything else.
I just have one question. So it would be the community connector that would pick up Heritage Woods. I'm thinking, because they're gonna have a pretty good staff there.
That's a long little walk
Well, there's no way
to
to
catch
walk
the
there.
fixed route.
There's no way you can
Yeah, you
walk.
can't.
But
do
they
the
do
big-
have this deviation now.
But they have the
That's-
community
the
connector
Heritage
that
is
comes up
definitely
Baker.
Within
Right.
the, pardon me?
The community connector comes up Baker.
There's that one route that Wave.
Yeah, they're
That would serve, presumably would serve that population.
Because I'm thinking about the staff. Because they're gonna have nursing.
Well, I also have
I mean,
heard that
CNA
they're
staff.
gonna have their own little shuttle bus.
But that I think is not for the staff.
I don't know.
I suppose they could use it for this.
I mean, if it helps them to, have employees, I could imagine that they might use it for that purpose.
Yeah,
we could-
typically they don't. Typically it's residents.
But that's part of our future.
Yes,
So-
exactly. That's
Yeah.
that's probably 5 years out.
Yeah, let's focus on.
Yeah, no, you're right.
All right,
We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. It's
They would
literally.
have, they would, I mean, that's a little bit of a dip.
Exactly.
so we have
They would
two
have to
other,
do that.
two other
It's
items
too
on the
far.
agenda, and it's
Well,
3:36.
this one doesn't have a deviation. so maybe they can
after
doesn't have-
these meetings. So I was thinking on the two items. The one related to community engagement, we might need kind of a subcommittee to work on that for our next meeting. And Jen, I was wondering maybe if you and Kim could do that.
Hmm,
And when's our next
I-
meeting?
Well, it's normally every other week, so you'll have 2 weeks.
I can't do that. I'm
Okay,
stretched.
okay, all right. So, I would be willing to work with you.
Okay,
Okay, let's see what we can do on
And
that.
what's in the community engagement plan, just to make sure I understand.
Well, actually, just in terms of community engagement, I think, we've talked about the survey for now to get some kind of read on what the writers and what, future writers might think.
Right.
But just in terms of part of our recommendation, I think it would be helpful to provide some suggestions or recommendations to the board on what we need to do if they decide to go out for a vote to educate the public.
Ah,
Yeah, so I think we need to be kind of proactive in trying to pull that information together.
maybe we need those PC interns anyway.
We might, yeah, we might. So, maybe Jen, if you and I can meet between now and the next meeting and have a report for the group.
Okay.
Okay, and then, we also had planned to have preliminary discussions regarding like the ballot question and the date and the millage request, and I didn't know if there was any thought, or should we add that to the next agenda?
so the date for the millage request?
Yeah, like, for example, it's been suggested that we could look at August.
Oh, I see.
Or-
Which ballot?
Yeah, which ballot?
At this late date, I think we should table it to our next meeting.
Okay, why don't we do that? Well, think about it, for the next meeting.
Yeah, and I know you've said this before, and I believe Jessica mentioned a timetable with me. Could you send me an email that just
Yes,
lays that out again?
I have
or else
all
an
of that
email just
information.
Lays that out again, so I can kind of look at that.
okay,
It sounded like we were one way, so I can look at the timetable. It would help me.
If we're to put it on the August ballot, the deadline for that is, I think, sometime in early May. And because of the timing, the board would need to vote on it, I believe, by its second meeting in April. In order to meet the deadline for August.
April
And
2nd.
that's what we've been sort of assuming, is that we were aiming towards August ballot.
August, yeah,
In part because there's a question of whether to put a revised ballot question for the fire department's capital needs, the second fire station and so on.
yes.
To put that on the ballot in November.
So August or November.
So basically, I have her email here. She says, August 6th, that's the primary that's coming up. There's one in May, but we're not gonna be able to meet that time frame because, the board would have to act by February 13th, so May is not an option.
Oh,
Okay,
unless we have a time machine.
yeah, by May 14th, in order to get on the May 14th ballot, let's see here, 6. The primary election's August 6th. By May 14th, the board would have to act on a proposal that would appear on the August 6th ballot. And, she's thinking no later than the April 23rd board meeting.
Well, the other option. would
So
be
she's
schedule
gearing us to
special.
look at August, to be on the August
August
ballot.
ballot, yeah, I think that's where.
There wasn't a second option.
Not really, other
Okay.
than August or November. Because there's an election in November too.
Oh, yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. There is one.
Yeah.
So with
And
that
there's something
schedule,
wrong with
are we
that.
looking at like, what 2 weeks are we looking at the survey? Like the week of the 18th and the 25th of March? Because we would have to have the survey ready, before our next meeting.
Yeah, we would
And
have
send
to
it
have the
out.
survey completed, I'm thinking by March 25th. The 2 weeks that we're talking about.
Well,
By
So
the-
that
by
would be the
end of
11th and the
Why don't
18th.
Chris and I finalize
Mhm.
the survey questions with the input that we've received and work with
AATA and Wave.
And Wave to
Yeah, 'cause-
distribute it, and then we'll look at, see if there's additional ways that we can distribute it, but I think at the very least, we would be getting input from current riders, which is
Right.
an important
So, yeah,
population. to-
I agree, we need to get that done.
Can I say something?
Yeah,
This is a big issue, transportation, millage. It's a big issue. And I don't think, it feels like we got like 3 weeks to get all this done. I mean, I'm over exaggerating to make a point. And I dare say that something this big of a millage should not be rushed on a ballot. That'd be my idea or my suggestion to the group, that we should shoot for the November and do it right. And they
Or-
still do the survey. I'm not saying
Yeah,
anything should
yeah,
change, but I mean,
yeah.
why are we pushing ourselves unless, you
well, I
know?
think, I think the reason why there was some discussion about.
And let me just say this, because there could be some outreach to our public.
Yeah,
Instead of saying, oh, we're gonna have all the nifty questions and we're gonna give it to everybody and boom, make a call. So go ahead, I'm sorry.
no, I was gonna just say, I think the rationale for maybe August is because you still have November as another option. But if you wait
Oh, if
another.
it fails, you mean?
No, if we, if,
If we're gonna go.
if it's hard-
Keep coming.
If you don't,
Yeah.
if you don't make it,
if the
You don't
board doesn't
make it,
make a
but whatever.
decision by the May deadline, you
Yeah.
still could aim
You
for
can still
November.
look at November.
So
Yeah,
if we're
back.
gonna factor in those kind of possibilities, why don't we factor in doing it right the first time and communicating with ourselves? I mean, we're trying to do all the right stuff
Well,
here,
it's-
survey, but that takes some time and to get it out and how you're gonna get it out and how we're gonna get it back and collate. So enough said. I'm throwing that out to
Okay.
the group because I feel like,
What do you guys think from AAATA? You're sitting here
I
quietly.
think it's our call.
It's not your call, but I just wondered.
More time is always good.
Well,
We
one
typically
thing,
get a higher voter turnout in November.
so,
Okay,
so one thing that that we know that we didn't know at our prior meetings is that we have another collection of millage funds under the current millage. I think we were all under the assumption that that had finished with the last winter taxes, but we, Chris and I were trying to look at the existing millage and actually looked at when it started and how long it's supposed to go. It actually does include the winter taxes in 2024. So we have another collection of that millage at that level. Now, whether that's adequate to fund what we have, as opposed to, a purchase of service agreement with AAATA
Yeah.
for the next, next fiscal year, I don't know, but that there is a little breathing room that I don't think we realized that we had.
right. Well, I think we can look at both. Now, keep in mind with this committee, it's discontinued as of the end of March, and I'm thinking something different will happen after that. So, we have about 5 months between now and August. And then you look at November, it's about maybe 8 months. So do you
Or if we
want
looked
to
at
think
next-
about it?
Or if we looked at next May, as another time that we might
Yeah,
put
you
a
could look at
question on the
that.
ballot.
but then, I mean, there's no wiggle room to go back at something else if
If
it
something-
doesn't.
yeah, I'm
If
fine with
something
November. I'm
happens.
just like slowed down. I feel like this reminds me of when I first got on the planning commission. I walked right into a master plan review. It had already been,
Was already overdue.
it was, well, no, I don't know, we were.
It was.
But it had already been in the hands of a subcommittee that put it together and we were supposed to do it like lickety split within 3 weeks. So I'm just saying to you, that there's a good reason to do that, telling me to, but I'd like the committee members to think about that. And we don't have to make a
Okay.
decision today, but definitely we have to kind
Well,
of make those decisions.
Our recommendation to the Board of Trustees could be, here's an option. Or here's 2 options to consider for placing on the August ballot. Or if you want to, you could take more time and place it on a later ballot. But, that could be one of the things that the
And-
board could decide.
It's really not for the board, it's for the community. We have to have time to talk to the people. You and I have been talking
Well, our
here.
job is to advise the Board of Trustees on whether to and what to put on the ballot. So you're right, ultimately, it's the community, that's the voters who will decide whether they approve it.
I agree with you, but it seems, I mean, we're all working on the same team. I understand I don't have the final say, but I presume that people are on this committee because they believe in transportation. We have some issues surrounding millages right now, and it seems that's one, let alone the work that we need to do to accomplish what we want to accomplish. And one of those things that I thought we were trying to accomplish was to be able to communicate with people. Because we think transportation is a good thing, and we, you know, I think this would be good for your tax dollars, so
one of your
that takes some time,
is-
that
is
takes some time.
making sure that there's enough time to communicate with
Yeah,
the community, the people who would be voting on it all.
yeah, I mean, yeah, you're
Which is the
asking them.
community outreach, well, we could have two different plans for community outreach depending on August versus November. And there
Right.
might, the strategies might be a little.
Not a week before they're gonna vote.
Well, why don't?
But that's when they start
We're
paying
not gonna,
attention.
we're not gonna get this settled tonight.
No.
So why don't we think about it between now and our next meeting and be prepared to talk about, you know, what might be a good recommendation for the board. And then between now and the next meeting, you'll work with AATA, waive.
Chris and I work with AATA.
Get that survey up and running. And Jan and I will work on the communication, the engagement plan,
Right.
okay?
Can I just ask a quick question? Maybe I was under a misunderstanding. Is there going to be another Scio village proposed for the November ballot besides transportation?
Well, possibly.
Okay, that's like, is that a factor that you're asking now for two villages possibly on the same ballot?
Well, I think that would be a mistake, but I think that is one of
Chris raises a good point.
one of the
Yeah.
factors that went into thinking this one would go on in August was to sort of reserve the November ballot for a potential rerun of an assessment increase for the fire department.
Okay.
But that
It is-
we're way far away from
And
that, so I don't know that will happen.
Okay, so.
But I think that was one of the factors that
It
led
is.
to us aiming for August for that.
Right.
But I think also we were thinking that this millage had expired. And now we understand that there is another collection in
Yeah.
next winter.
And I don't know if that was the case, Will, about the expiration, because others knew that it had not expired altogether.
Okay.
I think there was a sentiment of not waiting until the last minute
Last minute.
and try to deal with it at that point in time.
No, I think this is better. to
Yeah.
Think ahead, but maybe I'm the only one. No, I'm not, because Jessica, at last night's meeting, said she thought it was expired. So there was at least some board members saying that they thought that it had expired.
Yeah,
So
okay.
just a quick question, even though it says up to you. Will, are you worried about confusion about having multiple millages on the ballot, or is it too large of it looks on paper like too large of an ask?
Yeah, fratricide is what I was thinking. No, people would look at the two of them and they'd say, oh, this one's big and this one's small. I'll go for the small one. I'll vote no on the big one, or something like that. I think it's just, generally speaking, it's better not to ask for two millages at the same time if you can avoid it. Allow some time in between votes for people to catch their breath.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, any other items?
Well, we do have to have
Public comment.
public comment. And I can go see if.
I can unmute myself. You're all set.
Oh.
Your singular public is here again. I just have some technical information for you. The last meeting in the conference room, the recording, there was some glitch with the recording, so there's only 17 seconds. I recorded it here, but my laptop hard drive filled up and I got the first 2 hours of it. And then I lost several minutes of the conversation while I fixed it. And I got the end of the meeting. So it's on the Scio Community News YouTube channel under Scio Township Bus and Transit, Part 1 and Part 2. So if you need to review the videos for any information, those are available. And I wrote to Chris and told him that he could download them for the township records if he needed to.
Ideas.
So I see that you're recording today, and just be careful when you're closing it out here to I think it's save it to the cloud. Jan will know. She's the technical one. Running Zoom.
We're really in trouble.
Well, you run a great Zoom, so you will know how to save it. And then last thing is, I completely agree with Commissioner Moore about the speed and the enormous task you've taken on. As an outsider looking in, this project is vastly more complicated than I would have expected. And you have delved deep into questions that need to be taken away and considered and consulted with others. And so May 14th is the deadline for August. What is the deadline for November?
I think it's early August.
Okay. It's now March, and I can't imagine the fire SAD, anything on the fire SAD being ready by May. I think it would be a stretch even for August. So if you don't make May, I would be surprised if the fire SAD was on the November ballot. Nothing has been put together yet. There's still the tax sanity group involved. So and we have to learn from the mistakes from the fire SAD. Yet another reason to not push and hurry this one. We need to take lessons from that. So it may very well be that the fire SAD is a 2025 issue. So I support Commissioner Moore's suggestion that this might be better as a November ballot item. So thank you for letting me comment.
Thank you, Rob.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Rob.
Okay,
I think he was the only one I saw from the public.
is that it? Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
Yeah, no, we can't adjourn. We're gonna stay here all night.
All right, order pizza.
Somebody's ready for the weekend.
It's gonna be like a junior high lock-in.
Okay.
It's like a transit tea.